Well, let's have a look at the case of the athlete Sha'Carri Richardson, who's been banned from contesting the 100-metre sprint at the Tokyo Olympics because she tested positive to marijuana. The left is up in arms about this. They say there should be no ban on marijuana because it's not performance enhancing. Now, Sha'Carri was a gold medal favourite by running the 100 in 10.86 seconds at the US Olympic trials last month. And in her defence, she claimed that she was dealing with her birth mother's death. Even Joe Biden has defended her, suggesting a change in the doping rules as a result of this.
The rules are the rules, and everybody knows that the rules were going in. Whether they should remain that should remain the rule is a different issue. The rules are the rules, and I was really proud of the way she responded.
And his White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, has also backed her.
I will also note that Sha'Carri Richardson is an inspiring young woman who has gone through a lot personally. And I think, and she also happens to be one of the fastest women in the world. And that's an important part of this story as well.
And the hard left Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even blamed the decision on racism, an anti-doping decision on racism. She said, oh, we've just lost the tweet there. Donald Trump Jr. has also said, you're telling me weed is somehow performance enhancing, but being born and living most of your life as a dude and then competing against women isn't. It is absurd that suddenly, even Donald Trump Jr. is ultimately backing her in, although he does point out the absurdity of someone being transgender being able to compete in a women's event. But what you've got here is a situation that because there's a woke athlete, people suddenly don't seem to mind a bit of doping and drug cheating, even the President of the United States. The progressive left has built her up into a goddess. She's African American, she's publicly a lesbian, she thanked her girlfriend recently, and she has dyed hair. And in the rush to express support for her, people happily gloss over or even completely fail to mention the shocking history of her disgraced coach, Dennis Mitchell, who was banned for his own drug use. Curiously, this has not been at the forefront of any US media coverage, although the New York Times did devote an entire article to it back in 2014. Back then they wrote, "How sad for USA track and field. It has clearly run out of credible coaches. Of all the talented trainers in the United States, they've had to resort to naming Dennis Mitchell to lead its sprint teams at the World Relays in the Bahamas." This was back in 2014. They went on to say that's the same Dennis Mitchell who tested positive for banned testosterone in 1998 and then defended himself by saying that his failed doping test was a result of too much beer and too much sex with his fiancée. They go on, "Given his background, it seems ridiculous that the United States track officials would want him anywhere near their delegation or that any athletes would want Mitchell to coach them for fear that his doping background might cast a shadow on them." But that was the New York Times in 2014. Now the New York Times says, why we hold Olympic athletes to such ridiculous and cruel standards. Cruel, that you know that a substance is banned and yet you're surprised when you take it and you're disqualified. You can bet that if it was a Chinese athlete who'd returned a positive drug test, the reaction in America would be very different. If the Olympic Committee succumbed to this leftist pressure and changed the rules or allow a drug cheat to compete when others have been banned or even had medals revoked, then the Olympics have lost their way and are not worth participating in. It would undermine the effort of every young, honest athlete getting up at the crack of dawn to train and compete in the spirit of fairness. Joining me now to discuss this, New South Wales One Nation leader Mark Latham and senior writer at the Fin Review, Aaron Patrick. Aaron, should the Olympic rules change to allow people to take marijuana, which is the argument that has been put forward here?
Perhaps they should, Sha'Carri. Look, thanks for your really strong editorial there. And you raised some really powerful and fascinating issues. Look, for me, I come at it from a different point of view, which is I don't take drugs. I definitely don't take performance-enhancing drugs. But I do think we should, as a society and societies, looking to perhaps taking a more liberal perspective on some of these things. And I've got to be honest, marijuana isn't, I don't think, up there very high on the list of substances that should necessarily be banned. And I think in this case, marijuana is actually legal in the state that she was taking them. So I have a slightly different perspective on it than perhaps others.
Even if it was legal in the state where she was taking the marijuana, the pot, it's not legal according to the Olympic rules, Mark.
Well, that's right, Sha'Carri. And what nation would want any of its athletes going to the Olympics having, in the critical period of the national trials, had cannabis in her blood and tested accordingly? I mean, a country like the United States and countries like ours spend many millions of dollars supporting these athletes. They're professional people these days who make a lot of money with sponsorship and advertising, and Sha'Carri Richardson would go on to great riches and fame in the future. Why would you want an athlete jeopardising all of that and letting down her country by having cannabis in her system? I can't believe cannabis is a performance enhancer. It probably goes the other way, but I think that is the big sin. And for the tens of millions of Americans who would want to cheer her on, it's grossly irresponsible for her to be doing drugs when she should be taking seriously, ultra seriously, the role of representing her country.
And that of being a role model to many young people. And we know how damaging, particularly to mental health and mental illness, marijuana can be for teenagers.